episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, SCS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And this is a show so good. It happens every Friday. Great Scott to True Crime Phil, although we missed Phil last week and we dove into yet another story, but we missed Phil. Since I started talking, we've lost 3 people already. People are going to file in here because it's Fil and Scott, and better start seeing some people show on up. Busy week with Donna Adelson heading to trial. We had another hearing this morning. We covered that live, and she's looking like she's going to have a very uphill battle in this trial. Phil, some good news and bad news. The good news is I have shipped out your book. I was very late in doing that. My apologies. Sent you a copy of Surviving the Survivor. The problem is they wanted like $190 or something at UPS for me to ship a book to Hawaii, so I sent it to Houston instead. I thought you would enjoy reading it in Houston. It was not a money issue. I just felt like Houston would be a more appropriate place. You could sit there, you can lounge in your Ferrari. By the way, Phil, before the ratio,
say something here. And Scott, I think you will affirm this, that when anybody says it's not a money issue, it is.
By the way, Phil and Scott, you may not know this, but Jewish people, religious Jews, it wouldn't be me, I don't think, but religious Jews in court are not allowed to say that they swear to God. It's considered blasphemous, so they are allowed to say, I affirm. And that is why the word affirm is an alternate usage of the word I swear. Did either of you know that with your long, stellar law enforcement careers?
Did not know that. That's very interesting.
Yeah. I thought you might find that interesting, Phil, being that you are a man of God and the Jewish people never swear to him or about him. So, yeah, there you go. Cakespoo is coming to us, I think, from New Zealand, or is it Australia? Scott, can you tell the difference between New Zealand and an Aussie flag now that I put you on the spot?
No, I can't.
Yeah. I think it's a Cakespoo. I'm sorry. Let us know if it's New Zealand or Australia. Scott Duffy, Phil and I usually text midweek to discuss, well, what are we going to talk about? And I usually pitch an idea. And I was going to get into Sarah Boone, but that's a mess of a story, and it's a Friday. And so Scott said, how about the Australia? Thanks, Cakespoo. Apologies. Can you COE, could you let us know the difference between an Australian and a New Zealand flag, please? I'd be very curious.
Side by side.
Yeah, one's probably orange and the other is blue, and I'm just a total moron, but I think they look very similar. Mo has been a member for 6 months. The room is starting to fill up with the masses who will eventually be at the Super Bowl. By the way, Scott Duffy, are your Eagles playing tonight in Brazil?
Yes, they are.
They are.
I think it's an 8:15 game. Ready for it. Ready.
We have a majority female audience, so let's talk about football for a little bit. I'm sure they'll love it. What do you think of this transition to Brazil? The NFL truly trying to go. Let me interrupt that for this comment. Just finished the book, Joel. Thought it was interesting, funny, and poignant. It will change your life. It'll make you laugh. It'll make you cry, and it's available on Amazon. Scott Duffy, what do you think of the fact that they're taking the NFL to Brazil?
Good for them.
Phil's shaking his
head. I don't understand it, but good for them.
Phil, why are you shaking your head? I love it.
Well, because Brazil is a dangerous place.
Yeah, there were players upset. There were players upset about it.
And what are they telling what are they telling the players? Do not go outside.
Yeah.
That is so asinine. And I think it's the Eagles that are playing, right?
Yeah.
Eagles and the Packers. And
their quarterback, what's his name?
Hold on. I must I
The
must
young
offer. I
guy
must
that-
offer an apology. Abby Crossing. Females love football too. That is absolutely true.
That's
It's
a
absolutely true.
Who's the young guy, the number 2, the hotshot quarterback? Good guy. What's
Number
his name?
2.
Yeah,
Number 1.
That's his number, isn't it? Or is
Jalen
it number-
Hurts, the guy on the
Jalen.
Eagles.
What's his name?
Jalen Hurts.
That's him. I think
Number
it was him. Is he the one that came out and said he didn't want to go?
Yeah, one of them did. One of them did.
Yeah, I don't think Jalen. Yeah, it was a couple of players have shown that they're worried
That's
about
stupid.
security.
And Roger Goodell, I guess that's his big brainstorm. And he's an idiot anyway. But he's just about destroyed the fun of the NFL. And nobody wants to go to Brazil, so why in the world? I mean, it's just stupid.
And apparently, Green.
I'm sure it's
Yeah, and Phil and Scott, if you want to get shot or hurt, you can just do it right in San Francisco, like the rookie cornerback, Ricky Pearsall. Is that his name? He just got shot. They tried to rob his Rolex in San Francisco.
right.
Get shot in the chest.
17-year-old suspect, but crime's down in San Francisco.
This is going to be a fun one today, I can tell. And again, Cakes Boo letting us know she's from Australia. Scott Duffy, how was your week? You know, I usually, for some reason, don't ask you that at the beginning of the show. I ask at the end. So I'll ask at the beginning now. How was your week, Scott Duffy?
It's a great week. Great week. I was in Wilmington yesterday for one of my task force officers who, after 30 years on the job, decided to retire. So they have a clap out, which I imagine Houston has something similar. The whole department comes together, claps you out for your last time. So Corporal Hector Cuadrado, a great task force officer and Wilmington police officer. So good luck in his retirement.
Good
Yeah.
for him. Congratulations.
I have a question, Scott. You sent me an upsetting article today. An FBI agent retired was shot in, I want to say, El Paso.
Mhm.
Yeah. And he had some really rough things happen to him after his
He did.
retirement. But,
Yeah.
but your friends have a tough time, and Bill, once they retire, because you guys retire at a very young age. And then, I don't know, do people have a tough transition, Scott Duffy?
I think generally speaking, no. But his case, this El Paso agent that I sent you, a great law enforcement family. I think at least 2 brothers were FBI agents, and it just made its way through social media. I just caught it today. It's a very sad story of an agent that had suffered since his retirement tremendous mental health and was exhibiting some very, very tough behavior, especially after such a fantastic career in the FBI, and then in post-retirement, family, friends, colleagues, all saying how tough of a time he was suffering from all his on-job and off-job
Well, he had
experiences and suffered a major mental episode. And the facts are still unknown, but he was shot and killed by police. So
yeah, he I mean, I don't know many of the details, but I think his sister was struck and hit by a car, and then in a crazy turn of events, a pedestrian ran in front of his car. It was an accident, but he killed that person, and that triggered memories of the sister, and he just spiraled from there. I kind of gulped because I think I told you guys a bunch of maybe 2 months ago now, some crazy Miami woman jumped in front of my car, and I felt like my life flashed before my eyes. But anyway, let's not bring everyone down today. Still waiting for the breakdancing videos, Scott. Scott, are we ever going to see them?
Breakdancing videos. I'm not sure if any videos exist. There are a few pictures of me out there on the dance floor, but not sure if a video will surface.
Maybe there needs to be a more current rendition.
Yeah.
Of the Scott Duffy breakdance.
By the way, I'm glad I asked the question because Lauren and Mackenzie just put them side by side, albeit they're the size of a half an ant, but they look exactly the same to me. I see some stars on the Aussie one. COE for the end of the show. Maybe you can bring us up a full size. New Zealand has 5 stars. I just saw stars on the Aussie flag. Maybe at the end of the show today, we can peruse an Australian and an Aussie flag side by side. Ned Smith says the Eagles have a female quarterback. I don't know if that's exactly true, but she likes to rile people up. Catherine, coming to my defense here, not me. I have no interest in football. And look at this. Jackie, I like the tousled hair, Phil. It's tousled hair, Phil. It's what happens when you're in Hawaii. The salt air, the sea breeze.
I appreciate that, but at 3:00 today, it's coming off.
I thought, Phil, you usually do grow everything out in Hawaii. The goatees actually. Are you trimming the goatee as well?
Yeah, I've remained a little more trimmed up this year because I've been in a lot of testifying in court, testifying at depositions, giving depositions. So I've been on the professional edge of things more this season over here. So I've had to kind of clean up my act a little bit.
Yeah. By the way, it's kind of like the stars on the Aussie and New Zealand flag, but I don't know if anyone has noticed that I put Edvard Munch, the symbol of anxiety, the scream, right behind me on my little pedestal back there. He's right over my left shoulder. And you can't tell, but right next to him, sitting quietly in the dark studio, is a spiritual candle with Keith Morrison's figure on it, and it keeps me company here. I don't know if Fil and Scott saw this. I think I showed it to you last time, but I have now gotten the Keith Morrison throw pillow, and I keep it on the chair next to me, and he stares at me all show. And every once in a while, I look over, I get very scared.
So you can, in the most literal way, sit on Keith Morrison's face. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure that is. Maybe that's not appropriate for this family.
No, I'm glad you asked. I mean, I guess it's possible. I
want
want that. Huh?
And does he know this?
He does not know that I have this. There it is again.
He didn't get that to you, huh?
Maybe in trouble with Keith. I don't know.
Look at this. Now, Phil Waters, would you ever spend money to buy a Keith Morrison throw pillow?
No.
Yeah. How is this? How are we not invited to the Super Bowl yet? I mean, I know it's a few years off. We got to build the audience, but I just don't know how it hasn't happened yet, that someone has not found us on the internets and asked us to appear. I mean, I would much rather
my
watch.
Comments about Roger Goodell, I doubt we'll be getting an invitation.
Yeah, I don't think
soon.
He's going to invite you to Brazil next year, Phil. That's what he's going to do.
Yeah, if the Super Bowl's in Brazil, maybe we'll get it.
Here we go. Here's a definition of the difference here. It's laid out. Australia, 4 white stars with 7 points. New Zealand, 4 5-point red stars. I have like a weird mind. I could never memorize this. This is why I was bad in school. Like you could tell me this 1,000 times and I'll never remember this. It's just too much for me to remember. Aloha Friday. Yeah, Brazil is a country full of beauty. My brother-in-law is from Sao Paulo. Happens to be very dangerous, a dangerous place, but I would actually love to go to Brazil. Hi, everyone. I tuned in to Joel holding a pillow with a man's face on it. That would be Keith Morrison, Space Coast. Space Coast on the West Coast had his hands full with the audio this morning. Courtroom audio has been horrific in the Donna Adelson case. Cincinnati's in the house. Jackie, I love Keith too. Okay, let's get into the first story here. What are we drinking, Scott Duffy? About 50 people just jumped off the chat. What are we drinking, Scott Duffy?
Nice cold brew. Cold cream.
Oh, there you go. Excellent. So the COE has been running around. There's been, I don't want to bore anybody, but major traffic issues in Miami. And not going to say anything. It's just the second day in a row with 0 elements. Tough to do a show, but I think she's going to get some on there. Do love her, though. It's just hard to do a television show without any pictures or sound. And that's what we're doing here. Jimmy McNutty. Beep, beep, beep. Scott backing up the truck. I don't know if I completely understand that one, but Victims are, in this case, Stephanie and Daniel Menard, ages 73 and 79. I'll show you photos eventually. But this is a couple that was living at a nudist colony in California. Their friend, Irene Encraft, she's a neighbor of the Menards. She told reporters out there near San Bernardino, California, that the Menards really love to play poker, gather with friends for karaoke, and attend Bible study and church service on the weekends. I thought that was interesting, Phil, actually, because they do live on a nudist colony. Is being a nudist and a person of faith, are they necessarily mutually exclusive? I just thought that was an odd dichotomy, that they're nudists who enjoy Bible study and church services. Phil Waters or Scott.
You're
Scott.
talking to me?
No, let me talk. I'll bring it to Scott because I'm afraid of Phil's answer.
That was a very long.
Yeah, it was very Anderson Cooper-esque. It was like a 40-minute question. Scott Duffy, how come you were intrigued?
Exactly what I just went through for 2 hours with this lawyer in the depot.
I literally, how do you hide a weapon?
Good question, Becky.
This is why. So my question, by the way, I literally asked the COE. I sit at the TV and yell at night. It's one of my favorite pastimes. Anderson Cooper has been doing the news for close to 30 years, and it takes him 47 minutes to spit out a question. It drives me crazy. He's not the only one, but he's the worst at it. Anderson, you have an open platform here anytime you want to come on to discuss true crime or why it takes you 2 hours to ask a question. Scott Duffy, let me ask this quite simply. Why were you so intrigued by the nudist colony murders?
I don't know. There's something about nudist colonies that I think are intriguing. So it's there's plenty of jokes that can go around in a nudist colony murder.
Oh my goodness! Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Let's
But
weigh in.
if I can answer the question, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. People of faith and people who enjoy a good nudist colony. The good Lord
Well,
put us on earth that way. So
Bill Waters, have you ever been to Scott's Beach
the only
House?
thing
I
that
have
I
not.
would object here is that in a Bible study or at church, when they start talking about the rod, that may have a whole different context.
This show is definitely going to be the most off the rails. It's getting there.
So I don't know. I can't
Expect
imagine. I can't. I mean,
I needed this today, everybody.
Trust me, I'm not questioning their faith at all. And I agree with Scott. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive. I just think it's an interesting.
it is very interesting.
Atmosphere with which to study God's work. But
I think we have to. Scott Duffy runs off to the beach, and I'm wondering what kind of community he lives in on the weekends. Sunshine says, it's legal to be naked if you want. And then Chow here says, oh no, that's Pickleball Sue. Pickleball Paul. My sister called me collect in the old days. I asked her why. She said I didn't have change. She was vacationing in a nudist colony.
Good for her.
I actually met someone, and this is an interesting story. Let me digress for 30 seconds here. She was super smart. I was in the Guinness record for nude swim. We have not been beaten yet. Black Widow, tell us more, please. By the way, what does everyone think of nudist colonies? Please weigh in here on Surviving the Survivor. Let me tell you this. This is an interesting story. This is before the COE was even in Tucson. I met a lovely woman named Sarah, and I can't forget her. I can't remember her last name, but we called her Forgetting Sarah Marshall because that's what that movie was at the time. Really sweet. I would say she's not. She was attractive, is what I'm trying to say. People found her very attractive, very sweet woman. I end up talking to her one day. See how we met her, actually, I think. She used to drive around with Bill. Bill was a guy that she moved. This woman was an executive at Coca-Cola in Atlanta, and one day literally said, I do not want to have anything to do with corporate America. And she quit her job in Atlanta, high-paying job at Coca-Cola, and she moved to the desert in Tucson, Arizona. and she became a caretaker for a guy named Bill. And Bill was very wealthy, and Bill passed away, and Bill requested that he be cremated. And she was so attached to Bill that she kept his ashes in a, what do you call that? What's that thing called? An urn. In an urn in her car. So everywhere she went, she would bring Bill with her. It was crazy. It was a little weird. Long story short, I found out she lived on a nudist colony in Tucson, Arizona. And it was like 300 yards from where I live, but you would never know because it was like in the winding roads of the Tucson desert. That's my story. Scott Duffy, what intrigues you about nudist colonies before we dive into the details? This is a horrific crime, by the way.
It is a horrific crime,
Yeah.
but horrific crimes happen everywhere. So
yeah, including
you
nudist
just don't.
colonies. But I mean, what is it, Scott? Is it because it's it's taboo to be walking around naked that you find it interesting? Do you feel that Americans are too uptight? I mean, in Europe, nudity is much more accepted. Tell me what.
Yeah, I would. I would agree. I think we're a little bit. There's clothes exist for a reason, and there are laws in place, and so because nudist colonies also exist, and they are. I don't know exactly how many there are throughout the United States, but they do seem to attract people of all different types of cultures and interesting backgrounds. So I remember an FBI agent did an arrest, and I listened to his lecture, Jeffrey Reineck, who, if I remember, it was the Yosemite Park serial murder, was arrested in a nudist colony. And I thought that was an interesting aspect of the lecture. Here are two FBI agents in suits arresting a serial murderer in a nudist colony.
I thought you were going to say the FBI lecture was nude. That would have been probably more interesting, but that's interesting. A serial killer. Speaking of Australia, they have a large problem with melanoma. I think we have that in Miami too. That's random, Ned Smith, but thank you for sharing. Look at this. That's what Scott was just saying. Yosemite killer Carrie Stanger was hiding out at a nudist colony near Sacramento before capture. I never heard of this guy.
So
do we know, Scott, how many people was he responsible for taking the lives of? Do you know?
So it was in the Yosemite Park. If memory serves me right, it was 3 or 4. I want to say he attacked a young college girl who was in the park doing some internship and whatnot in the park. And then he killed a wife, a mother and daughter, and the daughter's friend. So I want to say it's 4. If anybody knows. I want to say it's 4.
Catherine weighing in from Maui, not far from Phil. I don't even want to mention what I saw at a nude beach on Maui, followed by Ned Smith. How can you sit on a church pew with your bare butt? Didn't think of it that far down the road, but that's a excellent point. Let's get into the story here. So you got America's most respected homicide detective here to break it down. This guy's name is Michael Royce Sparks. You have to use your imagination because the COE again has no elements for a show that requires elements. But Michael Royce Sparks, he was charged last week with the murder of these two people. The Menards, Stephanie Menard, Daniel Menard, and this, of course, as we've been talking about ad nauseum, happened at a nudist colony. This is the district attorney, Jason Anderson, Phil Waters. He says, we know they're dead, and we know there's 2 victims. And so the special allegation that we filed is multiple victims in a murder case. You don't get a free murder. We believe this case can go forward and prove that Mr. Sparks is responsible for both. There was a kind of an interesting charge here. I have to find it. But Phil, what is he talking about here? We know they're dead and we know there's 2 victims. So what is the special allegation that we filed is multiple victims? What does that mean? I'm not understanding that.
Well, in reading about this case, I believe that multiple victims is going to make it a capital crime. And I think they're going to go to the death. go for the death penalty on this thing, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
That's the distinction here. And so the laws in whatever state where these types of capital crimes occur, they have different elements, different standards, of course, but multiple murders is one of those special circumstances that would call for a capital crime, and the death penalty would be in play.
And Phil, I'd be remiss if I did not ask, have you ever responded to a homicide scene at a nudist colony in the greater Houston metropolitan area?
No.
How about at there's naked people at gentlemen's clubs? Have you responded to a homicide at a gentlemen's club? I feel like you would have done that in your career.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, everybody in there is naked. Only one particular part of that is naked. I mean, although, we had some of these all nude clubs and things would get out of hand. So you got a lot of naked people. And, after hours get-togethers. So yeah.
Okay.
But that's more of a vice problem than it is a homicide problem. Although we did have a couple of homicides that resulted.
The story has a twist that's disturbing. I'll warn everybody about that if they don't know. But so Scott Duffy, the couple had actually been reported weeks earlier, I believe, in the desert community of Redlands. Friends actually reported them last seen at their home on August 24th. This guy was their neighbor, the guy accused of their crime. Here's the twist that is so very disturbing. They have a pet dog, a Shih Tzu named Cuddles, and Cuddles remains missing. Scott Duffy, I hate to bear the burden of this question on your shoulders, but what and the manner in which these people were found is very disturbing. But what do you think is the fate of Cuddles the dog right now? Do you think he's collateral damage to this? Do you think he ran off in fear? What is your gut instinct as a law enforcement for many decades tell you about Cuddles the dog? By the way, it'd be great to see a picture of Cuddles and this couple and the alleged murder, but we'll get to that eventually. Go ahead, Scott.
I have known people to be cruel to people and not cruel to animals, and of course, vice versa. So is it possible that he had no beef with the dog and so found the dog a new home? Or he felt, okay, this dog cannot be on its own. I'm not going to be the one taking the dog to an adoption center, so I'll also put the dog out of its misery. So that remains to be seen, but I could see him, if he is a animal lover, that he may not have killed the dog.
So where's Cuddles? I mean, it's not a big area. It's a desert. I mean, I hope he's not stuck out in the desert. It doesn't sound like Cuddles would be a particularly good hunter of sorts. I mean, where could he be, Scott Duffy? Where could he be?
I would say it'd be one of two places. So he's either in another site underground yet to be found, and or he took him somewhere not so close to an adoption, just to drop him off at ASPCA.
That'd be interesting if he dropped him off.
It would be great, especially if something like that happened. You can track it. You have video. It would be great for law enforcement.
Okay, so let's get to some of the details, because this is Phil Waters' world and Scott Duffy's world. So again, Phil, last seen at their home on August 24th, and this person was arrested just last week. So maybe a week and change had passed. It was early September. Friends say they saw the car abandoned down the road from their home. Later, and these friends entered the home with a spare key. They see no sign of them. The woman's purse was there. Their cell phones were there. The bed was empty. The neighbor has a quote saying, Stephanie was a bit of a spitfire. She told you what she thought. She didn't have any problem doing that, and she took care of Dan Sowell, her husband. Then we find out, Phil Waters, that this guy Sparks, the suspect, told a family member told police that he confessed to being involved in the Menards disappearance and death, and that he had also been threatening to unalive himself. So once a family member, Phil Waters, goes and tells you, my family member said that he did this, I assume it is your immediate obligation to then go and find this person and question them. Is that right, Phil Waters?
Sure, that would open up an investigation. I mean, there's a sense of urgency involved in that, and so that's one of those cases. You get your stuff together and you get out there and get after it.
There they are, Dan and Stephanie Menard. He is 79, she's 73. They look exactly like, I guess, what I would imagine a couple on a nudist resort to look like. Look like nice people. Phil Waters, let me ask you a question. Costco, Target, you're in there one day and you see these two people. Would your first thought be that they live on a nudist colony, that they are nudists? Would that be your first thought?
Just looking at these, I think he's 79, she's 74 or something.
Yeah,
I'm
like just
that.
saying, if you're shopping at Costco, you see them, would you say these people are nudists or live the nudist lifestyle?
That's not a question that's ever crossed my mind. So I would imagine it wouldn't cross my mind just because they happen to be in there. So no, I don't. No.
I don't mean to make light of the crime. Pickleball Paul, nudist beaches are like prune farms usually. That's an interesting way of putting it. But there they are. So Scott Duffy, any surprise here? This guy Sparks is now being held without bail. He's due in court, and I think he's next week on Wednesday. He's going to be back in court. And apparently he does not have an attorney, according to court records. I assume he's going to be assigned a public defender here. There was some, they were kind of making a big deal about it in the media that he did not have an attorney present yet. Is that unusual, Scott?
He might be lacking the bare necessities for an attorney. I'd be surprised if one wasn't already appointed for him. So, I mean, the fact when they say he doesn't have an attorney, I take it they probably mean he didn't have a personal or private attorney, but most definitely an attorney will be appointed for him.
By the way, they did not share much details. Fil and Scott's of the world never do when they hold press conferences. So, but they say, Scott Duffy, that it did not appear to be planned. But when we get to the part of where they found this couple, it sure took a lot of work. We're going to get to that in a moment. But Scott Duffy, how would authorities arrive at the conclusion at this point, at this early juncture in the investigation, that it was not planned, that it was not premeditated? How would you know that so early on?
Well, my guess is they have an interview with him, so he might have stated, "Hey, this is what I did." I'm not sure if he was talking to law enforcement, but it also might stem from witness accounts and whatnot. That obviously this was a long-standing neighbor dispute, and then typically, as I've seen, especially I can tell you in the Philadelphia area, these neighbor disputes turned homicide often happen over a parking space. It's especially during winter storms where the garbage can or a cone will go out blocking what is a public parking spot, and then ensues an argument, and ultimately, even though I don't think a homicide is intended for any period of time, it usually comes down to, hey, that was the last straw, and then the act of violence leading to a homicide takes place. So I would venture to say they have something to indicate that with perhaps, the how they were killed, and then of course if he was talking.
Yeah, Ned Smith's asking about the motive. It's unclear at this point. Abby, to ha 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 ha. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Phil is back. Woot. Hi, other dad. So they've been
Hey, Abby.
reunited. Yeah, they've been reunited. Sometimes you can read a face and they look like a lovely couple, but this woman, Stephanie, definitely strikes me as a woman who would be have something to say, and that's what the neighbors said. This, by the way, is the suspect, but she looks like she would have things to say to her neighbor potentially. This is Michael Royce Sparks, arrested for murder. He looks like someone that would be arrested for murder, maybe. But Phil Waters, before we go any further with the details, this is something that just I can't wrap my head around. What Scott was just saying, that this is fairly common where neighbors fight over a parking spot, or that they left the garbage can. And we're going to hear about a tree in this case. And that leads to such heated vitriol that it ends up in someone killing the other. You're supposed to love thy neighbor. I think that is one of the 10 big ones. So, Phil, what is it? I mean, in all your years of doing this work, why would anyone get to the point where they kill someone over a parking spot or a tree, Phil?
Well, that's actually one of Jesus's commandments, to love one another. It just goes to what I have always said, is that anybody's capable of any act under the right set of circumstances. So, Mr. Sparks, there's been this contentious relationship with these neighbors for apparently an extended period of time over the tree that was in their yard. And whatever was going on with the tree was pissing this guy off. And something happened. This Spitfire jumped up and said something that enraged him. We don't know if he was at some level of intoxication. A friend of mine that was a police officer got into a dispute with his neighbor and ended up shooting and killing his neighbor.
Wow. What was it over? Can you share?
Well, it was stuff going on, whatever they were arguing about, the lawn, the fence, and
did he get charged?
It was also unnecessary. He was intoxicated at the time. He ended up losing his job. He gets charged with manslaughter, gets convicted. And so this kind of nonsense, it happens. I mean, people are people, and when they feel like their little fiefdom, their little piece of the pie is being infringed upon, there's nothing that brings about something like this quicker than that. And so you're encroaching on people's territory. And I would, like Scott's just mentioned, I'm going to assume they've interviewed this guy. I mean, the whole situation with the arrest and all that, he was down in some sort of a bunker area basement with a rifle, and he was going to commit suicide. He barricaded himself, and the police went in there and got him in custody because his rifle misfired. So malfunctioned on him, and he wasn't able to carry out apparently what he was wanting to do. So the curiosity is, what was the discussion after that? Do you explain why this even happened? I mean, something like this doesn't happen in a vacuum. This is something that builds up over time. And I'm sure there was, and I'm not justifying what he did, but I have no doubt that they were given as good as they were getting. And finally, this guy says, that's enough. And I'm going to resolve the problem for me now in a permanent way. And he does what he does. So when it comes out and says that it wasn't planned, that may very well be the case for the first murder. But, you can have an instant moment of intent right then and there. So let's, for the sake of the discussion, and we don't know the details, but what I'm looking at here is that however this thing gets built up, and he kills one of them. He murders the first one, and we don't know. The medical examiner has not released the manner of death or the cause of death. And so we don't know how he murdered them, how he killed them. And I think this is why they are going with the special circumstance here with multiple murders, is just as this prosecutor said, you don't get a free murder.
Yeah.
And the first murder, let's just say for the sake of our discussion, based on what we know, was a reaction. And we don't know which one was killed first. So that would be another curiosity of mine.
Always fascinated to hear this. These are not questions I would ever think of. Go ahead, Phil.
Well, it would not surprise me, given what has been said about the wife.
It was the woman. The wife.
She may have been the first one. She may have been the one up in his face. But again, it's just these are questions I have. And once that happens, or she may have been up in his face and he is doing whatever, saying whatever to her, and then the husband says, wait a minute, I'm going to defend her. So he steps up and he ends up being the first. So I think there's different scenarios here about how both of them get killed. But however that turned out, my point is this. The first one, we could say, was an act of passion. He was pissed and he reacted. Now the second one, that's intent there. So whether it was going through his mind, I can't leave a witness, or you're just as, you pissed me off just as much as this person. So I'm going to tell you the second murder was done with intent. And so that's why I just listening to what the officials are saying there, that's why these special circumstances exist, because you now have a multiple homicide scene. So, which makes it a capital crime. So,
by the way, we're not allowed to play the audio, but this is video just to give you an idea of the community. This was SWAT moving in. This is Redlands, California, near San Bernardino. I was out there for the San Bernardino terror attack. It is a desert, as you can tell. It's interesting when you have a neck tat like that woman, and then you age into older age.
Thank goodness that woman had her clothes on. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I agree. Well, look at this. She has. I'm going to take it back for a minute to hear. COE, can you take it back a little bit to the neck tattoo? I just want to also just be a cautionary tip. Go back a little. That was her. If you're thinking of getting a neck tattoo, just realize that you will grow into an old person, possibly. Here's the rest of the scene. There's Cuddles. There's Dan and Stephanie Menard. Cute dog. Missing. Cute little underbite. Hope he's okay, Cuddles, or she. So this is just a scene. Olive Dell Ranch Nudist Resort. This is the Nudist Resort, courtesy of KNBC in Los Angeles. There's SWAT moving out. I'm always fascinated by the movements of law enforcement in situations like this. So that is the suspect. Scott Duffy, someone, by the way, said they could see doing this over it being the last Rolo in the roll of Rolos, like fighting over that, as opposed to over a tree. I happen to love Rolos. Do you like Rolos, Scott Duffy? The candy with the caramel?
Yeah, the caramel. I don't, because I don't like caramel.
Well, let me tell you something. My grandmother is from Switzerland, and I had some of the best chocolate as a kid, but I love the worst chocolate. Like, you just give me a Hershey bar with almonds, and I love it. But one thing that I am obsessed with, and it's weird, because if you asked a 13-year-old Joel, I would say disgusting, because it has nuts and raisins in it. But I grew to love Chunkies, the Chunky bar, in the silver wrapping, Scott Duffy.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you go to your local Wawa or CVS, do this as an experiment. I'm not the only one. They have little tiny chunky bars, but if you go to CVS and you try to get like the 4-inch by 4-inch chunky, never in stock. Never, ever in stock. Ever, ever. They're always sold out because people are obsessed with chunky bars, I guess. Other day, long story short, I went into CVS. I'm embarrassed to say this, but I took all 5 and I have them stockpiled in my house, hidden from my children. They have no idea. They will never find them. I have an obsessive issue in the psychology of my brain. I saw those chunkies sitting there, and I said, "There's no way I'm not getting them." And I will savor them. I won't eat them that quickly. I might have 3 tonight, like 25,000 calories, go into a diabetic coma. But let me tell you something. I tried hard to just take 3 of the 5, and I took all 5. Okay, so Scott Duffy, you've been in these situations, not quite like this one. Sparks was arrested. They found him. They get this information. They get this information, and they go to his home. They can't find the guy. They go to the Olive Dell Nudist Ranch, but then they start to look around. There were numerous attempts to contact him. They get a search warrant, and they put up a drone, and they begin to tear down his house. Now, Scott Duffy, let me just stop it there. I thought that was kind of crazy. They got a search warrant and like a caterpillar type thing that destroys things. Once you have a search warrant, does that really just give you freedom to literally rip down a person's home?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It could. So so I've been in a situation where I did see a house torn down wall by wall. And then, of course, that is where law enforcement believes, hey, he's not coming out. And, so you have the misfire of the rifle. What I don't know is if it actually fired.
They said
So
it was they said it was, so they eventually find this guy underneath in a quote subterranean basement like that he built, which is kind of crazy. But they say that he had a rifle, and they say that he tried to unalive himself, and he did fire it, but it misfired.
Yeah. Yeah, so I imagine the wrecker, whatever they used that caterpillar to start removing the walls was because to enter even with a tactical team was just not going to happen. Probably, and it's also possible maybe they had some idea that the house could be rigged with all sorts of booby traps and whatnot that would be harmful going in to make an arrest. So remove the structure, and it's an amazing thing to watch a structure be removed in order to capture a very violent individual. So when I saw that picture, it instantly took me back.
Yeah, and Scott, obviously the drone is interesting, but is this just by the way, Cake Spoo, I saw you talking about chocolate. Tell us what the preferred candy bar in Australia is, if you don't mind. I would like to know the name of. I know you guys have Vegemite there, but I'd like to know the preferred chocolate bar. And Scott, people are I don't know, just I don't want to say disgusted with you, but they can't fathom that you would not like caramel.
Oh yeah.
By the way, I say caramel because I'm like but I force myself to say caramel because I know it's a weird pronunciation. But yeah, that's. But anyway, Scott or Phil, was I asking Phil or Scott? I don't remember. How common is the use of the drone now when you go to these scenes? Scott Duffy.
Oh, I think that law enforcement is smart when they can utilize the technology they have. And so I know they were just coming on scene for the most part in law enforcement in my last 2 years. And then, like, especially at Wilmington University, we have drone pilots like certification where we have we have classes. So it is something that law enforcement should absolutely use when they can. And so thereby their eyes and ears at a distance, they can get into places that Otherwise, a human can't without potential some danger. You can throw a ladder on a roof. Prior to drones, we would utilize the fire department and bring in their ladder truck, and go to a nearby, if we were going to go to an apartment complex or a house, and then utilize the fire truck and send law enforcement up the steps in order to be able to get a view going down from above the rooftop. So what better than a drone that's going to capture the exact same thing without any potential loss of life if dealing with a very violent, potentially violent fugitive.
It's a weird thing because technology is making crime easier to commit, I think, 'cause you can be a predator online, but it's also making it impossible to get away with crime. That is, I guess, what you would call a catch-22. It's like both things all at once. Phil Waters, back to your world here. Authorities now reportedly they do their search once they arrest this guy. And again, it's a subterranean basement, which I'm intrigued by because we kind of got glimpses of that with Rex Heuermann, the Long Island serial killer, the accused Long Island serial killer. Want to know why people are building subterranean basements, but they discovered human remains a day later in bags in a concrete bunker underneath the home. And the DA said, look, these are our two people. They were not positively identified at that point, but they say these are definitely going to be our people. And again, no word on how they were killed or a motive for the crime. But Phil, one person said they believe that this is their speculation, that the wife lost her cool or said something to this guy. The guy takes aim, maybe kills her, and then the husband tries to jump in, and he's caught in all of this. Is that a possible scenario as to how you think this played out?
I think that's what I just said, wasn't it? So,
shout out to analytical porn. Yeah, it's sort of what you said.
Let me say something about the aerial stuff. The drone is great only because it's much more convenient to use. We were using fixed wing and Fox units, helicopters, for this type of surveillance for years. So the drone has just made it a better, as Scott talked about, you're not putting, in terms of putting people up in aircraft where there is a danger factor, you're not doing that. So you're putting these unmanned drones up there to accomplish the same thing. So I think it's great technology. It's very cool. But I mean, they're keeping this very close to the vest at this point in time, which makes sense. And at some point, there's going to be we're going to know what the cause of death was, and that's going to shine a lot of light on it. I'm very curious about that aspect of it, because the car is found down the road, and the dog is missing. So you've got to believe, at least my perspective is that all of that was done after the murders. He's got to put the body somewhere. So what does he do? He puts them down in his little bunker area down there and takes the car as a distraction of some kind. And you've seen the area here. This is a trailer. It's like a single wide trailer.
Yeah, I don't know what the COE did with the videos. But yes, it is.
And in terms of the destruction of the thing, they've got to be able to get to that area, which and I'm sure the access to it made the situation that they had to remove the trailer itself. So I can see why they're doing what they're doing.
But Phil, let me ask you this: what's the deal? I mean, they say this was when I heard the subterranean basement. It's like a basement below his basement, is how they described it. that's when I was like, maybe this guy was planning this and built a basement thinking he was going to be able to hide him there. But what's the deal? What is your best guess as to why this guy would have two basements?
Well, we don't know enough about him. I'm just curious about Sparks, and what his background is. He may be just some nut job survivalist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they say he was a loner, big loner.
He's built these different compartments, and because of the end of the world kind of stuff. So, and that's just, those are those questions that yet to be answered. It doesn't appear to me that he would. I mean, I guess he could do it. It appears to me that this thing got started, got cranked up. He's at the end of his rope about this tree. And as what was described here in one of my scenarios, the same one here that this person's describing, she's in his face. He's had enough. He says something to her. The husband gets involved. And now he's taken one of them out. And now what do I do with this other one? So this is a case. It will be interesting to see. Number one, I'm interested to see if they interviewed him. If he submitted to an interview and explained what he did and why he did it. And I hope that is what happened, because he holds the key to this about what happened. Now, as far as the dog goes, I don't think, what's the dog's name? Cuddles?
Cuddles, yes.
I think Cuddles has probably gone over the rainbow. So I don't think we're going to see Cuddles. I think it is odd that, at least at this point, they had not said that they had recovered Cuddles from the same area they recovered those bodies. So, and if he gave the dog to somebody else, you would think that person would go, you know what? Seeing all this stuff on, unless they're a hermit of some kind and have no television set, but they would be saying, "Hey, I've got the dog, and here's the dog," and then they would be a witness. They would need to be interviewed as to what he told them when he gave them the dog. So I'm not terribly confident that Cuddles is still with us.
Yeah, that's very sad. By the way, if it sounds like Phil is sitting on an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, it's because he is. Your Wi-Fi was getting a little crazy, but you're back, Phil.
Was it?
Yeah, but you're back. Roxy Shantay, it is listed as a family-friendly nudist resort. Does Phil or Scott want to explain that one? I mean, Scott, what do you know about family-friendly as opposed to just a nudist resort? Then a couple more quick things, and we will move it along. Phil, any? I didn't ask the question. They was asking.
Well, Scott, you posed the question to Scott, so I'll.
Yeah.
Scott, you take a first crack at it. Well, maybe I shouldn't be using that word either.
First. Good one, Phil. Look
going.
at Ned Smith. Ned Smith, for some reason, unbeknownst to all of us. I guess because she said Carmel, California, but Clint Eastwood was a hunk of burning love in the day. What about a young Paul Newman? He was a very handsome guy. Scott Duffy, anything that you know about family nudist colonies as opposed to
has a good ring to it, doesn't it? Family friendly.
Yeah. The woman with a neck tat looks particularly friendly. So let's wrap this up because it's starting to get unbearable. The possible motive that we have talked about, a neighbor said that when Mr. Sparks first moved into the nudist resort, the quote is, "When I first moved here," this is from the neighbor, "he told me how much he hated them, and he hated Dan specifically because Dan would cut the tree and trim the tree down." So then we've got this motive potentially. Police have said, authorities have said they don't think there's any other victims. So, but Scott, my question here is, apparently he really hated Dan. This is Dan, for those of you who have forgotten, on the left. And so he really hated Dan. So does that, Phil's hypothesis is that he went after the wife first, because we heard the wife was maybe a loud personality, but does this change the math at all? Do you think it could have been the husband he went after because he was so enraged?
I mean, so it sounds like the husband was doing the act, right? Of trimming the tree, cutting the tree, taking it off his property line, and doing it without any sort of negotiation or any type of, communicating with the neighbor. Obviously, the neighbor didn't want that tree touched and wasn't going to do anything to take his branches off the property line. But yeah, so I could see the husband being the hey, this has got to stop, and the only way to stop it is stop the pruner. So, but if the wife, maybe she was the most vocal in her defense. I'm sure there were plenty of arguments. It would be interesting to see if law enforcement had ever gone there, or if they have their own type of security. I'm not sure how that works, but it'd be interesting to see how many documented arguments there are that made it to either their security, if it's private property, or law enforcement. That's
So I think that's enough with the Nudist murders. It's obviously we're not minimizing the crime at all. Two lives were taken here. Happened to be on a nudist colony with an older woman with a neck tat. But this does not minimize what happened. And Phil Waters said he's interested to hear if Peony Pink here in Australia, I believe. I always get confused if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but I think you're in Australia. Are New Zealand and Australia two different? No, I know that. I know that they're two different countries. I know that. I guess what Phil was saying, it's going to be interesting to see if he speaks and what he says, but looks like this guy is going to be going away a long time. I got to say, this is the one thing that just absolutely like fascinates me, is that you can get into just that one moment at time. And Phil always says this, and now their lives are gone and his life is ruined forever over a tree where they could all three have just been living happily go luckily on a nudist resort, getting no tan lines, but now everything is destroyed for what? Over a tree. I hope that's not the case, but it sounds like it is. Moving on to a much more serious story here. I know Phil Waters is going to have something to say on this, so I'm going to defer to him. The father of the alleged teen gunman who is purported to have killed 4, including 2 students and 2 teachers at Appalachee High School. That was in northern Georgia. They have now arrested the father, Colin Gray, 54. He is charged with 4 counts of manslaughter. This, of course, reminds us of the Crumbly case, Ethan Crumbly, the school shooter, and then the parents were convicted recently. I think this is a good thing, Phil Waters. I mean, obviously a horrible thing that happened. I meant by charging the father. We have got to hold parents accountable. I think it was Scott Duffy that texted me and said, look at courtrooms. There's never really mass shootings in a courtroom. Great point, Scott Duffy. Maybe our schools need, sadly, to have security like courtrooms. Phil Waters, your thoughts on the arrest of the father. His name is Colin Gray, not to be confused with the son, 14, Colt. 14 years old. He's going to be spending the rest of his life in prison, which is, I blame the parents. He committed the act, but he's a kid. Not that kids don't know the difference between wrong or right, but he does not have a fully developed brain. He had a horrible upbringing. I blame the parents. Phil?
Well, I would agree with you. I think this is a good thing. I think there needs to be a point in time, depending on the evidence, on whether to hold parents accountable for what their children have done. And in just reading about this particular case, this kid apparently was on law enforcement's radar a year before. And they went to the father and went to the kid and interviewed him. And there was nothing that could be done at the time. So what people, I think, misunderstand is that somehow they think that law enforcement has this magic ability to predict things, and that we can go in and arrest people or take people's freedom away from them based on what we think they might do. And that's just not the real world. So this kid got up on the radar. They did what they were supposed to do. They went and spoke with the father, spoke with the kid. Nothing at the time that they could act upon. And now you have a year later, and this is what this kid does. So in this particular case, and I'm not telling you that, I'm not saying that every case like this, parents need to be held accountable. What I'm saying is that when you have a case where the evidence leads to that, then absolute, they need to be held accountable. The parents do. And that's what's happening here. So I've seen some of the quotes from the father and so forth. So there's no way this should have happened. But the other reality is, and I've said this, you can put a police officer on every corner in every city, in every state in this country. And if someone is determined to go kill someone, they are going to go do it. So the reality here is the kid and the father both know that he's on the radar somewhere about something like this. And they both know that law enforcement is aware of it because they've got law enforcement standing in their living room interviewing them about this very thing. Now, what did the father do after that discussion the first time and last year? That's my question. What did he do or not do to prevent something like this from happening? However, the other side of that coin is that this kid was going to go do something like this. And so he went and he did it. And so, to playing the devil's advocate here, what was the father to do? So we have to know what the timeline here is from the time that they talked to the father and the son last year, and then what events occurred that led up to this shooting. And what knowledge did the father have that this was a possibility, that this kid was going to carry this out? Because we don't know the conversation that took place between the father and the son over the last year. And now, whatever he was talking about last year, it manifested itself into the actual act. And I think it is a good thing that parents, if the evidence leads that way, that they're being held accountable for the actions of their kids.
It has to start happening more. I think the Crumblies was kind of a landmark case and a precedent. Scott Duffy, what's interesting about this is your former agency went to visit this kid. You see Taterbug, the father, went and bought the kid a gun after the FBI visited him, which is sort of mind-blowing. Ned Smith saying that he made threats on Discord. I have not seen this yet, but I also saw a comment just now saying that he was being bullied because he was gay. I have not seen that. I don't know if that's confirmed, but that would be interesting. You know, this is a weird or difficult for me because there's a big part of me that's very empathetic for this child. Like, I feel bad for him. I obviously feel bad for the people killed. And I'm not saying he doesn't need to take responsibility, but I mean, just put yourselves back at 14 years old. And now he's going to spend eternity in a state prison. But Scott, what happens? You know, there's death threats put out on discourse. When does the FBI, because you hear about this all the time, when does the FBI, like, what did it take? What's the threshold? What did it take for the FBI to go to this home back in 2023?
Let me make a quick. I don't think the FBI went and interviewed him, right, Scott? I think the FBI passed the information on to local authorities.
Oh,
and the sheriff's office went and interviewed him. If I'm not,
that could be true.
That's correct.
Okay. That's true. Okay, sorry. So I
just wanted to
Yeah.
No. That's a good clarification. I'm glad you made it. So,
And if I could, so just a little background. Of course, we have I think it's 1-800 or 1 FBI tips. So the FBI has set up anonymous tips. However, anybody can get that tip through to the FBI as sort of a national database. But the FBI is not a 911 communication center, and they're very clear that if you're calling to report a crime that is in progress, that you are to immediately hang up and call 911. So the FBI will set up tip lines, for example, like that here in the school shooting, a mass shooting, wherever the FBI is going to be in an assist role, potentially moving into a primary role. They can quickly set up within minutes a tip line, and that's a very specific tip line nationwide. And then, of course, can dedicate quick bodies of analysts and agents to accept those tips and then, of course, process them as need be, generally speaking. After Parkland, it was completely revamped because of not only probably some of the training for some of these call takers in the FBI, housed primarily in West Virginia and other parts of the country, that calls would come in. It might be, for example, an email that has no follow-up. Hey, call me back, email me back, whatever have you. And so after the Parkland shooting in 2000, I think it was 17, the Valentine's Day shooting. Of course, there was this flood of information about the FBI having previous information and not getting it into the right hands. And then, of course, after an audit and inspection, realized, yeah, there were definitely things that could have been followed up on. Of course, law enforcement had been to that shooter's home quite a few times. If I remember, the number was maybe 39. It was a very high number. And guns were removed from the home, guns were returned back to the home, et cetera, et cetera. Again, it had fallen short. And with regards to the FBI changing and kind of tightening up things in Delaware, as a supervisor, we put together kind of a quasi federal, state, local partners, got all the school resource officers, all the departments that had school resource officers. And then we put together this quick, informal task force that, hey, if any of us receive information of a potential threat against a school, that we were to act on it quickly, day and night. And we had great partnerships with the IP and other subscriber after hours, because typically these things come in after hours. What we had done was, when information comes to us or information comes through the locals, we quickly vetted out who's best to go and handle this. The FBI typically does not get involved in juvenile crimes. They just don't. As a matter of fact, the Attorney General, him or herself, must be able to give permission for a juvenile to be federally arrested. That's just not going to happen. And so typically what has happened is that the information would come in. Because of our resources, we were able to quickly identify who and then get it to the right local jurisdiction to do with it what they will. And often it would be a knock and you have a sit down, because once you identify the potential user of, and typically they were gaming conversations, and so law enforcement is sitting there. And I've done it myself, where I've gone out, grabbed a couple of the local guys, depending where a threat was. And when you go, you quickly make an assessment. Often I would get, oh my gosh, how stupid I am. And so it is that pucker factor when you have parents and children with federal and state or local law enforcement saying, hey, there's a threat against a school, maybe a vague threat, not in any particular way, fashion. And then, of course, you can just assess. There's this family has immediately grasped, as well as the suspected, which was often a child. And you make a
What
quick
is what
assessment.
is what is the general reaction to you, the FBI showing up at the door? Are they
It's a
crapping
pucker
their pants?
factor. It is an absolute. First of all,
Like,
yeah, denying I didn't do it, and then of course, if it came to, well, you did it, so what did you mean by it? And then it's like anything else. You think you're having a private conversation with another gamer across the nation, and then all of a sudden, as you're playing Call of Duty, this was our big. You're playing Call of Duty. I'm going to shoot you like I'm going to go shoot up a school, and that's captured, forever captured. And so the other side would be like, oh my gosh, I can't sit on this, and then would report it. And then of course, that's how law enforcement typically got involved. And then when you go visit the actual person who said it, of course, an assessment would be, that was the stupidest thing I ever said. I would never say it again. And you can get a good feel for both parents, or whoever the guardian is, and then of course whoever said it, that it it was, they'll never do it again. And so you're like, okay, this is
but
written.
but
And then
the converse has to be true too. Like, are there times when you do that and you're like, this guy's gonna act on this
oh,
eventually?
absolutely. And you
Yeah.
can you can get a feel for the parent. That's where local law enforcement, because we had jurisdiction to go and interview. We didn't have jurisdiction to perform any type of an arrest, or perhaps you needed to do a search warrant. And then local law enforcement, where I would send what we call a lead out, and say, hey, can you go do an assessment interview? And they would come back and say, we made an arrest. We made an arrest. Often it would be terroristic threatening. And so that was simply to allow, hey, this was something that we didn't like what we heard when we approached them. We didn't get that vibe, that assessment that this is probably going to be resolved quickly with a good parent smackdown, so to speak. And so law enforcement would be like, we're making an arrest. And so they make an arrest, terroristic threatening. They would then get a search warrant. They would search the house for guns. If any guns were present, they would remove those guns temporarily until the matter was resolved. It's unfortunate, but that is the level that it's come down to. And like here in Georgia, the FBI received that tip, quickly provided that tip to law enforcement. Law enforcement did exactly, probably like every protocol, go and assess. Um, they'll probably go back and say, okay, what did we not do? Maybe that we should have done. And then perhaps a policy will be put in place that basically it comes down to, hey, I'll allow the parent and everything else to resume. And you may see a policy fall in place where it says, hey, if a situation like this comes again, you are to make an arrest of terroristic threatening. You are to seize guns, perhaps, and then allow the court system to better make, at least to give mental health um, introduced into a situation where it's like, hey, are the parents doing what they need to do in order to address this situation? Or, hey, there's nothing law enforcement can do at that moment, just like going to a domestic and you don't see anything, and both parties are saying, yeah, they're, I did, he or she didn't hurt me. And then law enforcement leaves, and then something worse happens. I mean, law enforcement can only act with what they see and gather at the moment that they're inside that house. So I'm sure there will be an investigation on what seems like they did exactly what was needed to do, but there was not enough to justify an arrest or removing of guns for any situation.
Well, let
And
me say something about that. This is not a question of policy here. This is a question of law. It's like what I just said. We can't go in and arrest somebody based on what we think they might do. Those officers or those deputies didn't have any probable cause to take any further action. They took the action to think. Now we can all look at this thing in hindsight and go, "Oh, they should have, could have, would have." Well, that's not reality. So the Monday morning quarterback stuff on stuff that's already occurred, and now we have knowledge about something that's occurred that they didn't have at the time. So, we just need to be careful about saying that they should have done something different. They didn't have the information to do anything different than what they did. So to me, I'm very sensitive to that, and it's just this world of the police should have done something when they didn't. Just this new world look that, we should have been seers. We should have been somehow been able to predict this and therefore intervene. And that's just not the world of reality.
Yeah.
So, and to Scott's point about the feds, I think it's federal law, Scott, right? 18 years and older. That's where the feds get involved. So even in Texas and some other states, in Texas, adult is 17. Your adult status is 17, but the feds would not get involved in an investigation regarding a 17-year-old because by federal law, it's 18. And there's some other states that 16 is the age of adulthood. So, there's just certain things that the FBI cannot get involved in by law. And their responsibility, Scott's already alluded to this, I'm just kind of echoing what he's already said. But the FBI's part in this is to pass on the information to the local authorities that can address the problem.
I don't know if either of you know the answer to this from Sweet and Salty 1111. I thought it was no longer legal to give a juvenile under the age of 16 a life sentence. Didn't the law change in 20? I don't know. I mean, he's going to be behind bars for a long time. Bill, the mother here, her name is Marcy Gray, not to be confused with Macy Gray. She's the mother of this school shooter, 43 years old. She has faced prosecution in Barrow, Fulton, Forsyth counties, accused of domestic violence, drug possession, property damage, traffic violations. She's also faced civil fraud charges related to a vehicle purchase. She was in jail in Bell Hill County as recently as April. The point is, she's been in jail a lot. So I'm just curious, every time I say this, I get nervous because everyone's going to come down on me. But what are your thoughts on this kid? Does he deserve life in prison without the possibility of parole at 14 years old? Or does he deserve to be rehabilitated and get help and try to give him a second chance? What do you think, Phil? You are the elder statesman, the sage of the three of us here.
Well, my gut instinct on cases like this kid, I think they're going to, did I read right that they're going to try him as an adult?
Yeah, they're trying him as an adult. They already made that clear.
So he made a big boy decision. He's going to have to suffer the big boy consequences. And I read somewhere where there was a fascination with one of these other mass shootings at a school that he had apparently prior to this.
Yeah, I think it was Parkland, right? I think he was obsessed with Parkland.
I don't know if it was Parkland or one of the others, but he had this fascination about this type of thing. And, whatever level of maturity, look, when you decide as of age 14 that you're going to go in and you're going to kill people, that's an adult decision. And I don't care what his background is. I don't care what he, the bullying and all that. That is no excuse. They may explain it, but that doesn't excuse the behavior. And I'm telling you what, I'm only speaking from my personal experience of having gone to families and had to explain to them that one of their family members has been murdered by an act of violence. And it doesn't matter what the age and stage and whatever of the murderer is. There has to be a certain amount of justice and there has to be a certain amount of mercy. It's always a balance. When you see something like this that is so cold-blooded and so planned and so premeditated, because this kid's been thinking about this at least for the last year. So this is not something that he just all of a sudden woke up and said, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to go shoot school up. And if they commit this kind of act, now I don't think the Supreme Court, I think the Supreme Court has ruled that they cannot get life without parole. I'll have to, maybe somebody on here can check that.
I just saw also there's no capital punishment under the age of 18.
Oh yeah, well they're definitely not going to get the death penalty.
Yeah.
However, getting a life sentence with the possibility of parole may be in this. Now you talk about rehabilitation. Look, that's going to be on him. The system is not going to rehabilitate anyone. Any rehabilitation is going to be on him. It's going to be on any person who commits an act of violence, or any crime for that matter. It's on them to be rehabilitated. It's not the system that's going to rehabilitate. So opportunities are going to be presented. If this kid is convicted, tried as an adult, let's just say for the discussion, he is given a life sentence with a possibility of parole. He will have a long time to prove that he has been rehabilitated, that he has reflected on what he did, realizes what he did, and has come to make himself a better person and make better decisions, and offer him the opportunity to the possibility of being paroled, and to show that he has in fact been rehabilitated. Now it's pretty tough to, and in this particular case, his age will work in his favor to that end. Let's just say, like, again, for the sake of our discussion, 25 years from now, he gets to go to his first parole hearing, and he walks in there and he presents himself, and they're going to be documenting throughout his stay in prison what he's done that's been positive, what he may have done that's been negative. So there's a lot of factors that go into this. It's just going to be very tough for this type of an incident for a parole board to justify putting this person on parole. Just going to be tough. But again, I think his age and time works in his favor to that end. And then you don't know the family members of these victims, what their perspective will be at that time, because I will guarantee you that they will be at every parole hearing, if that happens, that comes up. And it'll be interesting to see over time how things change from their perspective. So we've seen this I've seen it with families. I've had a case where a family member was murdered, and because of a stupid act of a guy that got pissed off at this other guy at a titty bar, and he went and got his gun, and the guy was standing outside talking to the dancer, and holy cow, he just decides, I'm going to drive by and shoot this guy. And that's what he does. And the family of the victim, I think he had expressed such, and he was an adult. I mean, he was a grown man, that he had expressed such remorse and was so sincere about it that the family testified for him in the punishment phase. And he ended up, I believe, he was looking at life with 30 years to do, or looking at 5 to 99. He got 5 years. 5 years. Probably did 2.5 years and was released. So there's a lot of dynamics that goes in to something like this, the investigation itself, the prosecution, and then later what the ultimate outcome may be regarding possibilities of parole. Does he get another chance to show that he understands what he did was so horribly wrong. It's just very tough. It's very tough to predict that, and only time will tell. But these are sad cases, every one of them. They're just you can't even find the words to describe the tragedy involved here.
The saddest part is there's a decent chance we'll be talking about another one next week because they're happening so frequently, and these always trigger, I don't want to say copycats, but other kids who are feeling the same way, and then they act on it. Analytical Blarney AB was gifting some chats and things, and she's a teacher in North Carolina, saying she didn't sign up for this. And honestly, I'd be nervous to be a teacher. I mean, you're in a school, you just don't know what's going to happen, and it's scary these days. You saw that giant student who body slammed his teacher. He's spending 5 years in jail. Now she's never going to be the same. It was like a 300-pound kid that body slammed one of the teachers. Anyway, Ralti Lal Ramanzami, he is lurking from Mizoram, India. I don't believe we've ever had Welcome India that I've seen. So India is in the house. Welcome to the good people of India, a place I would like to visit for sure. Analytical Blarney again saying here, two teachers.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. My church here on the Big Island does a mission work in India, and we've built a cafeteria for the orphanage there, and done all sorts of things. And our pastor here, in fact, he's going over there in October to get with the pastor there and continue the mission. But that's really cool. That's a cool deal.
That is awesome. By the way, when we finally hit it big, Phil, Scott, and I will be going to Israel, India, conducting charity work and doing podcasts all at the same time. I need to get to India, though, for sure. This next story is the great Phil Waters would say, will get everybody's panties in a wad, and that is for sure. Casey Anthony, do you remember her, Scott? Oh, golly. It's Casey Anthony right here, leaving the gym with her new boyfriend. She's 38. God, it seems like she should be 61 at this point. This is 15 years ago. She's been dating 48-year-old Tyson Ray Rhodes since January. They met at the gym here in South Florida. He was married. She broke up the 20-year marriage to be with him, according to the New York Post. Of course, Casey Anthony, she was accused and acquitted of murdering her own 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee, and basically pinning it on the father, which a lot of people cannot wrap their minds around. It's been more than 15 years since this happened. Scott Duffy, if you're once a high-profile criminal defendant like Casey Anthony, should you be able to continue to live your life? You're not convicted. She's out. You see her with her water bottle. Big, strong, hulking man. Presumably he was married. She stole him away. Your thoughts on all of this?
So what's this stealing away? I would imagine he's as guilty, whatever.
That's what they're saying, Scott. That's excellent point, Scott Duffy. Takes two to tango.
Takes two to tango. Yeah, she's acquitted. I mean, and that's our justice system, right? It's allows you to be considered innocent until proven guilty by a jury of your peers, and they acquitted her. So yeah, she will live as anyone will live, doing whatever it is that they do. And but I'm a firm believer, no matter what, if you are responsible for whatever crimes, injustices you commit, at some point you do have to pay the piper.
Yeah. Phil Waters at one point, look at the comments. Don't get me started on this woman. Oh no, girl.
I'm with her.
Yeah. There's one point the New York Post reported. I'm paraphrasing here, but basically they were in public. They knew they were in public. And he says to her, "Come over here, innocent." And he pats her gently on the behind. Phil Waters, maybe to just annoy the paparazzi, whoever was out there. What say you, Phil Waters? One of the more high-profile defendants who was acquitted, a la OJ. Someone here says this dude's an idiot. Should she be able to live a perfectly normal life? Brianna, a friend of the show, calling her homemaker. Casey is a horrible human being, shameful. Anthony makes me sick. Phil, what does it do to you, Phil Waters?
Well, if I ever see this woman's face again, it'll be too soon. Our good friend Susan Constantine was really involved in this case, and she gives a really interesting perspective about the whole thing. In fact, I think she attended the trial. And we've talked about this case, and of course, I look at it, and I'm sure Scott looks at it from the interview perspective, and that we're watching. I remember watching some of this trial and just watching her. That's where my attention was, and the man jury.
Island Wi-Fi, Phil. It's kicking back in, Phil. But
we had a hot.
yeah, you're fading on us. We'll give you a second. You always come back. I'm gonna pivot to Scott because we can't hear you. But I'll see you when you kind of turn into a liquid blob. But once you're back, I will know you're back because you will no longer be a liquid blob. But Scott Duffy,
it's a good emoji.
It is a good emoji. This is a love story with a very bad ending. This is a beautiful couple. They get married, the newlywed couple in Michigan. On the day of their wedding, the groomsman was fatally struck by a vehicle. And do you care to venture a guess as to who hit him?
So I'm taking it that this is an intentional act.
Yes, intentional act.
The reception. Is it right outside the reception?
I don't think it was right outside, but his name, the victim, is 29-year-old Terry Lewis Taylor, who succumbed to severe injuries. But any guess as to who the suspect is in this case?
Being that you like to choose some pretty good cases out there, I would venture to say
that's one way to put it. Yeah,
that it would be either a jealous ex or someone very new to his family.
This would be the groom, the man who got married. Hours after he is wedded to Savannah Collier, his name is James Shira, 22. Her name, the beautiful bride, Savannah Collier. Just hours later, he was involved in an argument, and as you just heard Phil Waters saying, people lose their you-know-what, and he runs over his groomsmen, and now the wife, Savannah, has also been charged as an accessory after the fact. Scott Duffy, I must ask you, it's supposed to be the happiest, most joyous day of your life. You're with your beautiful bride, and you then veer off, literally and physically. You veer off the road to hit your groomsmen. How is this explained? Does this surprise you?
Yeah, so both newlyweds, bride and groom, killing the very person that spent a lot of money probably on a tux and a gift to share your wedding
I hope
day.
the tux was just rented, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I tell you what, though, I hope they have some sort of honeymoon insurance because I think their honeymoon will be in lockup.
America never ceases to amaze me. It's an amazing country that we live in. You've got football on Friday night in Brazil. You've got brides and grooms running people over the day of their wedding. Phil Waters, I know you'll have a take on this one, and I promise you we're getting to the tail end here. There's a 1940s themed festival in North Norfolk. This would be Virginia. And the North Norfolk Railway, they organized this popular, it's called Steam Back to the 40s Festival. Now that I'm looking at this might be Europe, so I apologize. This might not be Virginia. But the bottom line is they have now banned Nazi uniforms from the 1940s. These are people who do reenactments. The men are part of the Eastern Front Living History Reenactment Group. They raise money for military veterans, et cetera, et cetera. He says, it is the UK. This is not Norfolk, Virginia. This is the UK. We do battle reenactments, displays, and educational visits across the UK, raising money for charity. The Nazi uniforms were supplied by Germany, as were the weapons to the foreign volunteers from 1941 to 1945. They're as close to authentic as you can get. As a group, we've been attending this, but apparently people who did not like this started brawling, and so now the Nazi uniforms have been banned from this event. Good idea, or should history be reenacted accurately here? Phil Waters.
Well, my short answer is that history should be, if they're going to do these reenactments, do it accurately. This is the same kind of idiocy that has got people tearing down statues in the United States. So trying to rewrite and erase and alter history instead of leaving these monuments to show that changes have been made, and this is the history of our country. And I just get weary of people these virtue signalers, that all this stuff offends them. Really, they walk around all day long being offended by something. And so, you know what, these people that made this attack in UK, and now they're going to ban this stuff and that, because it's high time we quit reacting to these select little special interest groups that want to destroy everything for everybody else. That would be like going to air shows. They have air shows down at Ellington Field, south of Houston, all the time. And in some of those air shows, they reenact Pearl Harbor. So that would be, okay, we're offended because they're flying Japanese Zeros with the rising sun on them. So we need to take that off because we're offended. It's just a bunch of horse crap. History is what it is, and trying to erase it, to me, it removes the lessons that we should be learning from that history. So this is completely stupid to do this kind of thing. Stupid when it's done here. Stupid when it's done there.
I had a feeling Phil would have a very specific reaction, and yet he did. Look at Black Widower. The cancel thing. It's called cancel culture here in America. Another thing that amazes me about our country that you guys started is such a load of balls. Love the Irish, how they turn a phrase. And cancel culture. Our country is a strange place, man. It really is. I mean, I love America, but it is a strange place. Aloha lives next to Pearl Harbor here, speaking of World War II. That's interesting. It's a crazy 60 Minutes story last week or 2 weeks ago about how there was like some sort of toxic spill at Pearl Harbor, and a lot of people have been getting sick, and the government was doing nothing about it. Scott Duffy, not much to talk about on this next story. I just thought it was good to share. California woman, she was getting her packages stolen constantly. She lived in Santa Barbara, which is a very nice neighborhood. People kept stealing her mail, and she was really annoyed. She went to the police. They couldn't help her, so she decided to do what a smart person would do. She mailed herself an envelope with an Apple AirTag, and the thieves stole that envelope, and she contacted authorities, and they drove directly to their home, I think in a neighboring county. The two suspects were booked into jail on charges of possession of checks with intent to commit fraud, conspiracy, and identity and credit card theft. The 37-year-old was also booked on a burglary charge and several other theft warrants from Riverside County. Very smart Scott?
Well, they can get the postal inspectors involved in that little deal. That's a federal offense to go in there and steal mail out of the mailbox. So, yeah, that's good. And those, do you know, Scott? Let me ask you this: do you know what they call the postal inspectors?
Hmm.
You know
Like-
what they're called? I mean, like you guys are called fan belt inspectors. Do you know what the postal inspectors are called? No, this is a true. This is true. They
No, I don't.
they are referred to as the silent service,
Hmm.
and they are the oldest federal law enforcement agency. Did you know that, Scott? I don't think you did.
I didn't. Because I thought the oldest was the marshals, so the postal are the oldest. Okay. All right.
Wow. Post office has been around a long time. By the way, I don't know what made me think of this, but tonight on 2020, I know Phil Waters is going to be riveted. They're doing, I think, a 2-hour on Karen Reed trial that stirred up a lot of emotions. So I'm
When
gonna,
is that?
that's going to compete with Brazilian football tonight. It's
Mm.
9 o'clock tonight.
Well, I just want to know. I won't be watching either one of those things. So, yeah.
You're not a Phil. You're not a football fan.
I am a football fan, but I'm not a fan of what the NFL's turned into.
Yeah.
I prefer to watch college football, but they're even destroying that with all this NIL crap, throwing money at these kids. I tell you what.
By the way, who's your college football team? The Okies or what?
Oklahoma State Cowboys.
Cowboys. There you go. Phil, this is a perfect segue to my next story. I didn't even plan this. Kansas City Chiefs. You've heard of them? Big football team. Won a Super Bowl or two.
Yeah, I think in passing I have. Actually, you know what? Let me tell you something. Let me tell you a little story here real quick. So, the Kansas City Chiefs.
I'm so curious who watches this.
Look, before they became the Kansas City Chiefs, they were the Dallas Texans. And when they moved the franchise to Kansas City, they became the Chiefs. And then the Dallas Cowboys came into Dallas, and it was great. So I'm a Dallas Cowboy guy, but when I have to default to another team, it is the Kansas City Chiefs.
By the way, they've canceled every other team. I mean, the Cleveland Indians are now the Guardians.
Well, that's stupid too. That's
yeah.
awesome.
So how are the Chiefs still the Chiefs? That's my question. It's interesting. They've kept their.
Well, I'm just assuming the owners. I think the Hunts still own it in some respect, but you know, well, it's like the guy that changed the Redskins. Now, I mean, this stuff is crazy. It's absolutely insane.
Look at this, Phil. Your adopted daughter here, Abby. She's been a Chiefs fan her entire life. But you guys segue perfectly from me. You've heard of the Kansas City Chiefs. Scott Duffy, I'm sure you're familiar. You know, there's Eagles, like fanatics. Literally a fanatic is a mess. There are all kinds of what they call super fans, right? So the Kansas City Chiefs, no different. They've got a super fan. His name is Xavier Babudar. They also call him, his nickname, known to everyone in Kansas City, as Chiefsaholic. Well, he's now been sentenced to 17 years and 6 months in prison after he was found guilty of stealing nearly $850,000 from 11 banks across 7 states. This is according to the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Western District of Missouri. He was arrested the same day as the Chiefs kicked off their game, which was yesterday, I suppose. In 2024, he was also ordered by an Oklahoma judge, speaking of the Cowboys, to pay $10.8 million to a bank teller he assaulted with a gun. He earned notoriety for dressing up as a wolf at Chiefs games over the years, and he quickly became a fixture on social media. After 2 arrests in December and July, I don't know why he was out. He was permitted. He admitted to a string of robberies. Why would he have been out for if he was there? If he was in for bank robberies, but Scott Duffy, you handle bank robberies. You're an FBI guy. This is a pretty damn serious crime, right? I mean, this guy's going away. Is he going to be able to watch Chiefs games in prison? He's being sentenced to 17 years.
Ooh, 17 years is a good number for bank robberies. I've
Like
seen a
a
lot
low
less.
number?
No, I think it's
Oh,
a
a high number.
pretty good number. I mean, they should always be higher, but the feds often take a low ball plea. But
Well, that's in federal prison, right?
is it? It sounds like if it's multiple states that he's pleading,
Yeah, federal
I
prison,
don't
and
know.
he'll do all of that.
he'll do all of it. There won't be. There might be a couple of months at the end of that 17 years that he's.
Not much.
Was he using the very costumes that he was dressing up in on social media?
I don't believe so, but it would have been amazing if he was, because there had been the Chiefs super fan doing that. Let's move it right along here, because we're gonna have to say goodbyes too. Phil Waters, as you recall, I think last show that we were all here, we were talking about the price of Bennifer, Ben Affleck and J-Lo's home. It was like $35-40 million with 29,000 bathrooms and bedrooms, 2 bathrooms for each room. Well, now this is a much more modest home. It is on sale for $499,999 in Southern California. Does that sound like a deal to you, Phil Waters?
Well, last time we talked about Bennifer, I will never get back. So why are we talking about this now?
Well, I'm just wondering if you think that $499,000 is a good deal in Los Angeles for a home, and if you would consider buying it.
I wouldn't consider buying any home in the state of California.
Well, here's the catch, Phil Waters. It's only half a house. It's a half a home because a tree fell on it, and the other half of the house is completely demolished. It is 645 square feet with an open concept floor plan, including the tree that is now taking up half the home. The house is more than 50 years old. So house hunters now are allowed to buy what's left of it. Welcome to Los Angeles. Phil, I'm with you. Never am I moving. Half my family lives in LA. Sorry, Space Coast. I've had my fill of LA. Mainly because I can't.
Well, if I were prone to move to California, it would be Northern California. It would be nowhere near freaking LA. That freak show down there. No way.
Scott Duffy, would you buy a half a house if it was a bargain? You know,
I don't see it as a bargain. Now lower the price a little bit more to where,
and then you might.
Then I might. I'll take it for $1.
Ned Smith is vacillating here. Now I'm worried. Should I change my? I think Ned Smith's just having her own conversation today. Very random. Scott, would you advise her to change her pick to the Eagles?
Always.
Anybody who's still watching and listening, could you just send me an email, survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com, and tell me why you would listen to this? I'm curious. Even though I host a show. Final story here. I titled it "Not Just a Vase" or a Vase. Also, let me know if you say vase or vase. Phil Waters, this is something that I'm surprised has not happened to my family, but her 4-year-old son was looking at ancient artifacts. Anna Geller, the mother, looked away for just a fraction of a second. A crash occurred. She heard a loud crash. Next thing you know, a rare, very rare 3,500-year-old jar was broken on the ground. This was the family is from northern Israel. They were visiting what is known as the Hecht Museum in Haifa, which is a beautiful port town. The kid was curious. This thing used to hold wine or oil. It dates back to between 2200 and 1500 BC, and the kid knocked it over. 4 years old, totally destroyed. They thought they were going to be in tons of trouble, but it has a nice ending. The museum says that they would like to invite the family back. They're going to try to repair it and put it back into proper restoration mode. Phil Waters, what is your advice to parents? What is your cautionary tale as it pertains to this particular story of a 4-year-old knocking over a vase that is older than Jesus?
And where were they? Where did
this was in a museum in Haifa, Israel, which is a port city to the north, and they are from northern Israel.
Well, number one, why would they put something like that in a place where a 4-year-old could even get to it? So that sounds like that was kind of self-inflicted. And then if you're going to do that, then I would think there would be some kind of an age requirement to prevent toddlers from entering the freaking museum. I mean, that's maybe that's why the museum's not that upset about it. I mean, the fact is that they should have done something to prevent that from happening. And put something like that in a clear plexiglass stand encasement of some kind. That's they may be rethinking that.
The exhibit. Yeah. Cakesboo says 100% Phil is the voice of reason, followed by Vesper Martini, common sense rules for Phil. Scott Duffy, have you ever had a situation where one of your 4 children almost knocked over something that's basically does not have a price tag because there's one of them in the world? Have you ever come close to that?
No, not with one of my kids. I will say, right before I left the FBI, one of my partners, my colleagues in Philly, called me up and he goes, "Hey, I have to retrieve a thumb." And so
a thumb drive or a thumb?
A thumb. It was a Delawarean. It was a college Christmas party. He was drinking a little bit too much, and he went over to what I've learned is a Chinese 10,000-year-old warrior statue, and he broke the thumb off and put it in his pocket and brought it home to Delaware. So that literally became an international incident. So we had to go out to the house.
Where did it happen?
In a museum in Philadelphia. It was on loan from the Chinese government, and so much for having a Christmas party.
So who broke the thumb off? Who was the person that broke the thumb off?
It was a 20-year-old college kid.
Well, and so you had to go and did you apprehend this college student? Did you find the thumb?
So my buddy was doing, he's just over the line. He goes, "Hey, can we go visit this house?" And I said, "Yep, let's go. Let's put a team together and go have a chat." Sure enough, it was upstairs in his dresser.
Now, let me ask you, I have so many questions about this. When you go to that home, are you just knocking on the door? Do you have a gun drawn? Is there a fear that there could be how do you approach this house? Is it
this was not one of those incidents where I had any reasonable fear for my life, for certain. This was I don't want to say it was comical, but it is very difficult to especially when it was a pretty large house. So you knew that, hey, this is somebody who has money, who comes from somewhat of a background, who's in college, and what you're doing is what is going to happen here? He'll deny it. It doesn't exist. It didn't happen. But sure enough, nope. It's upstairs.
I have a feeling he's telling this story on his own podcast right now, as we're speaking. So what happened to this kid who stole the thumb?
So it carried on for a while. I don't know what the actual resolution. I know it went to trial. I think there was some sort of negotiated plea. It fell through. I want to say he was found guilty, and then I think he was found unguilty. It went back and forth. But I haven't followed up on it. But if you Google Chinese warrior statue thumb stolen in Philadelphia, you'll see what I should do now. What the end result is. Can you imagine? Having college.
If you did it, and by the way, if you did it in China, you get your head.
Scott, what did the kids say? Did you all interview them?
Yeah, my partner did. He was
what is it?
he was very forthcoming, very apologetic. It was from what I remember, it was like one of these sweater Christmas, these colleges they get together. You have a sweater party. You add some drinking to it, and hey, what's that over there? Well, that's a display. You shouldn't go over and see. It's not part of the party, but once you had too much to drink, he went over. I don't think it was an intentional act. I think it was, I can't help but touch it, but it's 10,000 years old, and the thumb broke right off.
And it had a big sign that said "Do not touch."
Yeah, and of course one of those heavy duty ropes.
Someone already pulling it up here. My cat's name is Karen. A Delaware man has pleaded guilty to stealing the thumb off of a $4.5 million ancient Chinese warriors.
Well, here's my question: why are they having a drinking party at the freaking museum in the first place?
These fraternities, I tell you, they get the best, and
we got to get this guy on the show.
I was in a fraternity. We had a big deal called the hobo, and we went and stole outhouses. I'm not really sure. I don't get this connection at all. Maybe it's a Philadelphia thing. I don't know. Sorry.
I need to get that guy on the show.
So we had more fun,
I bet you this guy's working on Wall Street, making like $10 million a year now.
Well, he's paying back the $4.5 million that he.
Yeah, exactly. I'll say it once. I'll say it again. I'll say it many more times. We live in an amazing country with amazing people. Look at this. We have come full circle. The Nudist camp from Joan Witt is in Corona, and my ex-husband lives there.
Oh, my.
Joan Witt, email me, survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com. Let's get him on the show, him and the thumb stealer. If I read that story, I would never think that Scott Duffy responded to that alleged and I guess actual crime, since sounds like he went to court. Listen, these guys put their lives on the line, but they also are keeping artifacts in check and making sure that miscellaneous thumbs are not stolen off of ancient Chinese warriors. Scott Duffy, I got to ask you, like, after your partner and you leave the house, are you just rolling? I mean, hysterically laughing in the car? You can tell me you're retired now.
Well, being that my buddy took it, and then of course, driving back.
Do you have to put it in a bag, in an evidence bag?
Yeah, he took it just the way it is. It wasn't get it back as soon as possible. Yeah, it's whatever it was made out of. I don't know what the material was. When you hear 10,000 BC or something to that effect, it's an amazing.
Was the thumb reattached? Was the thumb reattached?
I imagine somehow between the Chinese government and our governments, that statue is.
Oh, they just put some super glue on it. There you go.
Yeah, I was gonna say it'd be awesome if you and your partner were like cool about it. You're like, come on, kid, and you like.
Here's an example of my artistry that was.
Oh, it's a beautiful turtle.
The little turtle feet were broken off of the little turtle, and I just got my Gorilla Glue and I put him back together. So he sits up here now.
That's beautiful, Phil. I was going to say
it's not quite a Chinese thumb, and it was actually one of my grandkids that broke it. But he's living the life.
If you and your partner kind of quietly said to this kid, like, "Hey, kid, I'll get you into the museum. Let's go back there right now, and we'll Gorilla Glue it back on." What would have happened if you got caught? Would you have been charged as well as an accessory to the crime? Especially as an FBI agent.
That's a good ploy. You always look for segues, right? You're in somebody's home. You're just trying to, first of all, you're trying to show, hey, I hope you still have it, and that's a good segue. I'll have to remember that. Hey, we're just going to quickly run into the car and put it back on. Nobody will know a thing.
No one will ever know it. Look at this. My cat's name is Karen. She has more info. The Delaware resident. I want to know this guy's name. He's going to pay a $5,000 fine and complete 100 hours of community service.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, you got as Steve Cohen famously says, this kid should not point the finger; he should point the thumb. It was his own doing. So there you go. Once again, we come to an end of another show that I'm not sure why anybody watches, but happy to make Becky Ireland. Sounds like she's having a fun time with herself. Phil Waters, it's redundant. I ask every week. I get the same answer every week, but I assume it is Bible study, then pizza. Why don't you leave us with a couple of words of wisdom, and then we'll close out with Scott Duffy.
Well, I would just, as I always tend to do, my thoughts go to the folks that are willing to get onto this merry-go-round every Friday, and I certainly appreciate the attendance and I appreciate the thoughtful comments by the folks that watch, and so it's always a good experience for me, and of course I enjoy y'all's company, and and look for maybe some bigger, better things in the future. So yeah, I think it's a good day when we can get together. It's a beautiful day here on the island, and I'm, I look out my window and I see a postcard. So it's an amazing place to be. And
I look at your area and I don't see Nugget. Where is Nugget?
Well, Nugget is asleep on the couch.
Let me tell you something. My new avocation is teaching Fred, my pug. By the way, you should be following me on Instagram at Fred Ethel STS. But I had some spare time today, and I gave Fred swimming lessons. He's not a very good swimmer, so I have to lifeguard him. Well, Phil's shaking his head, but it's a real issue for me, Phil. I'll tell you why. I've got a yard and a closed-off area. So what I would love to do is let Fred and Ethel just run freely, but we don't have a pool gate. And so I live in constant terror that Fred is going to sink. Forget my 3 kids. I worry that Fred the pug is going to sink. So I literally have to lifeguard him. I might have to just...
So the solution there is, Joel, is install a pool gate.
Yeah, I know. It's a lot of work, though. So we'll see. Swims better than iguanas. Plenty of iguanas around here.
Yeah, you said the iguana. There's an iguana infestation there in Miami.
Yeah. I saw the biggest iguana the other day that if I hit it in my car, I would have damaged my car. That's how big it was. A puppy life jacket. I do need to get that. I'm going to go on Amazon. I'll feel much better. I'll strap him on with that. Can you still drown? Scott, can you still drown as a puppy if you're in a life jacket? Like, can you flip over? He's not the brightest bulb.
If you're in the life jacket and the puppy went in the water?
No. If the let me tell you something. People who know me know that I loved my beloved Mabel Rose more than anything in the world. I am convinced that Fred is Mabel reincarnated. They share so many commonalities. Obsession for food. They bark at dogs on TV. But this pug, Fred, is he's like a different. There's something just wild about it. He's got green eyes, and he always looks like he's annoyed and angry. So he makes me laugh.
He probably is annoyed and angry. Because you put up a pool gate and you keep throwing him in the water, wanting to swim.
I would have taken a bullet for Mabel Rose. She was I had her before the COE, before my kids. Not a day that I have 47 pictures in the house of her. Not a day that goes by where I do not think of the beloved Mabel Rose. But I've convinced myself that she is now Fred. Call me crazy. Dogs can naturally swim. Pugs, though, are he's pretty good. And then, like, when he loses energy, he starts to think on his behind, and he goes down like a torpedo there. Scott Duffy.
How long are you leaving him in this pool?
I try to run their energy out.
Laps? What are you doing with this dog?
Well, Ethel loves the water, and she does literally swim laps. So she could be in there all day, and Fred wants to hop in, but now these dogs have instinct, Phil. So he's a little hesitant to stick his whole body in there. He yaps the entire time. He gives me a headache, but it's fun. Scott, I have to ask you, I've been thinking about this the entire show. Your cold brew coffee, do you add sugar? I think I've asked you this before. Do you add sugar or sweetener?
Yeah, so I used to go and get cold brews, but now I go to my local Target. I get my big chug of cold brew,
Mm.
and then I pour in my cold foam. So I don't add sugar, but I imagine there's plenty of sugar in the cold foam, and just let it drip down, and it's sweet.
Mm.
Yeah.
Look at this. The notorious COE reminding everyone Ethel is an Olympic level swimmer. She would give Michael Phelps a run for money. Scott Duffy,
Mm.
what happens to the shore house and now that fall is going to come? Do you still go in the
Yeah.
wintertime? Do you go in the winter?
Yeah, not the winter, because it does close from November through March. So, it's we miss it. I would love for it to be open, but we'll enjoy it definitely the next couple of months. So fall, there's
And
nothing like fall time at the beach, the shore.
Scott, by the way, I hate fall, and I'm so glad I'm not up there for fall. Fall gets me, I don't know, that seasonal affect disorder. The minute people love fall, I can't stand fall. Hate it. Hate fall. I hate fall. I could snap and hurt a neighbor. Scott Duffy, your final words of wisdom here.
Yeah,
for the
like
weekend.
I thoroughly enjoy these Fridays. I feel like I'm in a squad room, so it's nice to bring me out of retirement and be with you guys. And then, of course, I feel that after seeing the comments and so forth, and getting to know everybody through their comments, it's a nice feel. I do want to say, though, Wednesday is 23 years, so I kind of pull back, and Wednesday I'll kind of disappear. My family knows it, and it is 23 years of 9/11. And so,
Mm.
for everybody out there who responded, all the first responders in all three scenes, and then, of course, for the many, many, many families of those who have now, I think the number has far exceeded those of the numbers that have died the day of 9/11, of all the first responders. And I still see stories every day of those who have succumbed to their injuries. So, 23 years, just hats off to everybody who responded.
Glad you brought that up. I cannot believe it. It's been 23 years. That's insane. My cat's name is Karen. I just got a Ninja Creamy machine and I love it. Guess what, Karen? I'm trying to stay healthy. So I got one because someone told me about it to make healthy things. And my kids, for Scott and Phil, if you don't know what this is like the latest, newest craze. You can make really good ice cream at home. I have no idea how to use it, have not touched it since it's been taken out of the box. My kids put in all kinds of crap and they make like birthday cake ice cream and stuff, but I have to figure out how to use it. COE, let's please get the kids making some ice cream for the weekend. How's that? We will end on that note. Carmela Corleone, the owner of the craziest cat in the world. Fall is pretty amazing in Canada. Space Coast, what's autumn? It's 110 degrees in LA. Yeah, so that's it. Everyone have a beautiful weekend. We're back on Donna Adelson all next week. By the way, Scott and Phil don't know this, and it's sad, but I think next Friday is going to be the last Scott and Phil for 2 weeks while I cover the Donna Adelson trial because it's going to be going through the weekend. So make sure you are here next week, and we'll end with a comment from Ned Smith here. Best guests, COE, Mods, Space Coast, Steve Cohen, Phil, Scott. Thank you for all you do. Be safe. Have a great weekend. And Scott Duffy's 100% right. Take a moment on Wednesday, I believe it is, to think about what happened on 9/11. We will see you next week.
Aloha.
Aloha.